This session is short. It is a 30-minute session, give or take a little bit. And it's just really just to give you an overview of EVAAS projections, how we can use them from the leader's lens to support teachers using them actually. And then if you have any other needs or questions, there is always the ability to request us to either come to your school and support or just to meet with you one-on-one to support your understanding of how to use EVAAS projections or anything else data related. So let's jump in. So if you could drop into the chat one example that is not educated related of making a projection. When do we see projections being made? Not educated related. And there's one common answer I keep getting, so I'm wondering if it's going to show up today. Sports, yes. Final Four brackets, yes. Business and finance, yes. Right? What is that stock market going to look like? I have no idea anything about stocks, but yes. Other thoughts? The weather, right? So I mean, it's up here, but the weather, right? So like we are forecasting good weather until Friday. So let's enjoy it. But right, so we make these predictions, these projections, these probabilities all of the time, right? What is somebody mentioned in another session I was in, the probability, the projection of the cost is going to, how much is going to cost me to send my kid to college, right? All those different projections, we make them all the time. And it's always based on trends, historical trends and patterns, and where we see things go up and what's happening in a situation in the world that makes gas prices go up and go down. Those are the things that we use to make projections, and it's all based on historical data. And that's what we're going to look at today. EVAAS projections are the same thing, based on historical student data to kind of give us a gauge of where do we think students will land at the end of the year. So this is our team, and I am very lucky to have on this call, I believe everybody is here except for maybe Kelly, but the whole team is here. Claudia's here, you all know her. Lauren is here, you know him. Mary Paradinsky, you know her from MAP, and Ryan Rebeck, you know him. We are all here today to support. So if you have questions, please do not hesitate to put them in the chat. We have enough people in the background that can jump in and answer the questions for us. If you think it's for the greater good of the group, feel free to come off mute and ask your question out loud. So EVAAS projections basically answers the question, how do we best support our students? And we say this kind of vaguely, right? We want to make sure that we're not using projections as the end all, but how do we use projections in correlation, in triangulation with other data to make the best instructional decisions regarding our students' outcomes, right? And that's what we look at our projections for. So there are two main targets that we want you all to get out of this particular short session. One, accessing and interpreting the student projections. So how do I access it? How do I read them? And then how do I support teachers in using the EVAAS projections to increase academic growth for all of their students? So those are our two main objectives for our time together today. So if you've been in any other EVAAS sessions with us, you know that projections are kind of the core of it all. That is where we get to our student reports. Before then, we are looking at our school level reports and teacher reports. And we're going to dig into a little bit of teacher reports today because they connect directly to our student projections. So how do we get student projections? How does EVAAS calculate student projections? And given a certain circumstance, that's the kind of the question, given a set of circumstances, specific circumstances, average teaching, average schooling experience, what is the most likely outcome? So what EVAAS does is they look at the past history, and I'm going to use myself as an example. They look at the past history in all subject areas for Tamara, right? And they are assuming that Tamara has had an average has had average progress, has had average schooling experience, right? And they take all of those and they say, given her testing history, Where will she land? Say she takes the English 2 EOC, right? But there are other students who have taken the test as well. And so when they look at my testing history, they also look at other students' testing history who have taken the test, right? And they look at those trends and those patterns and see where people are landing. And they look at students who are academically similar to Tamara, to me, and they say, how did those students do on the exam, right? And they use all that information. How did students do in the past who have taken the exam, given their testing history? What is Tamara's testing history? And they use that information in the model and they calculate a projection for Tamara, right? So it's basically projecting, given all of Tamara's testing history, relative to how other students also tested and scored, right? Where will Tamara land in the state distribution? Where will Tamara land in state distribution? So here's a little bit of a visual, kind of the same thing. Take the testing history for Sally, who has not taken English 1, and compared it to and looked at the testing history of all students who have taken the English 1 exam. And then look at how students actually scored on the English 1 exam. And then they look at that and they project Sally to be at the 65th percentile, right? So it's all based on testing history, trends and patterns from my testing history compared to those who have already taken the test, right? So we make this announcement because we want to make sure everybody understands that our projections that we currently have are based on students' prior testing history and assumes that the student had an average schooling experience of students who took assessments prior to changes in instructional delivery and closures. So COVID has not impacted our projections because our projections are using history before COVID, testing history before COVID made its great appearance, right? And so we in 1819, I believe, or 1920, yeah, I can't get my years right. There was actually, I think it was 1890, there was actually projections made for 2 years out, right? And so we have projections that were already set for 2 years. And so we are just using those same projections because they were based on a student's prior testing history and their trajectory going forward. So our projections can be used, one, which we always use, to build an awareness of anticipated student performance, right? So that's number one. Everybody wants to use our projections to know where will students end at the end of the year. But it also can be used to inform decision-making around remediation and instructional supports. So what students need to be pushed with rigor, what students may need a little extra support in different areas, what groups of students are we missing? And so we can use our projections to do that. We also can use our projections to group students with teachers, right? So which teachers are best for which groups of students, especially when we're doing blitzes and things like that toward the end of the year. So how are we using that data, not just to say this is where Tamara should end at the end of the year? It also uses to motivate teachers and students regarding growth opportunities. So our student projections in combination with our teacher reports can tell us a lot about where teachers gaps are in terms of how to build their instructional capacity as well as student learning capacity. So we access our projections in 2 different places. We can access projections if I have leadership access in EVAAS, and you go through custom student report or student projection report. Or if I want it nicely organized by teacher and in class, I can just come into Navigator Portal and I can access it in Navigator Portal. And I can just go to reports, EVAAS, and then EVAAS projections, EOI. You will have projections for your 3rd grade reading, 5th through 8th grade reading, 5th through 8th grade math, 5th and 8th grade science, and then our math one and our bio will have our normal projections where we get state projected percentile and probabilities for different levels. For English 2, since we are in a standard setting year, the projections will be to the 50th and 80th percentile. So you'll see students who are slated to score above the 80th and students who are slated to score above the 50th. And so it looks a little differently. It looks more like the NCFEs did in prior years. It will go back to normal in the next reporting year once they have done all the level setting with projections. All right. So let's do a little bit of review so that we're all on the same page. We have Miss Maple. So I'd like you to meet Miss Maple. And Miss Maple has 2 years worth of data here. And what we see is that in 2018, Miss Maple, she was in the green, but she was in the negative green. And we see that she was still meeting some growth measures, but there were some kids who were pulling her down into the negative a little bit, who were losing ground academically. But then we see in 2019, Miss Maple did a turnaround. She got some PD, she read some books maybe, there was a facilitator in the space that was giving her some support. All those things happened, and Miss Maple shot up to exceeds growth, no longer just in the positive, but in the positive blue, where she's at about a positive 2.3, right? That's Miss Maple's value adder, right? Now, let's look at her diagnostic. When we look at Miss Maple's diagnostic, what we see is that we have our green growth standard here, and we have our blue bars. And our blue bars for our lowest group tell us that these kids made growth, and our standard error bars tell us that we have enough evidence that everybody in this group had basically made some growth. They have moved up in their achievement status. Our middle group really made some growth, and their standard error bars are way above the line, and they tell us that all of the students in here made some gains. They improved their academic achievement space, and they are on their way to closing some gaps if they are there, and maintaining, right? So everybody here is doing great. Now, our low group, although our blue bar is still above the green line, our growth standard, our standard error bar is crossing that line, which tells us, there are some kids in this group that lost ground academically, right? And so when we look at this, we want to think hypothetically, where is Miss Maple's area of focus? So let's say, hypothetically, Miss Maple this year is now teaching an honors level class with lots of high performing students. And she is continuing to use the same strategies and resources she used last year when she fell into the exceeds growth category. What's likely to happen to Ms. Maple's teacher effectiveness data given these two constraints? What do you think is going to happen to her data this year, at the end of this year? And you can come off mute, or you can type it in the chat.
I'm going to guess it's not going to show as much growth because it's harder to grow those kids.
Right? So well, not necessarily because it's harder to grow those kids, but because she's not really doing anything to try to change her instruction, right? So she is still kind of just maintaining, like she's feeling, and this is where we have to push teachers. When we look at this growth, this value added, and they see they're in the blue, they're like, woohoo, yes, I'm in the blue. Good to go. I'm good to go. But at the end of the day, if she doesn't dig into this diagnostic report, she doesn't know that her area, personal area, professional area of growth is with her high kids. So if she continues to do the same thing, this exceeds growth, and we're just making a projection really, will possibly fall backwards into either meets, right? We're not saying that it's going to drop all the way back into the red, but it might go back into the meets growth because she's really not making too many changes in her instruction to meet the needs of this group. Let's talk about Mr. Birch.
Tamara, can I just add real quick, if you go back? I know Patty mentioned that it's kind of hard to grow those kids. I just wanted to spend some time clarifying that, because that's a big misconception that it's hard to grow high kids or low kids. But just want to remind the group that the goal here is to maintain students with their peers in the district, in the state. So this high group are being compared, and similar to the teacher's job is just to maintain those group of kids at whatever percentile that they are. That's 1 year's worth of growth, or even to keep them in trajectory with the other group of students who are like them. So there's not really like, it's hard to grow them because the teacher's goal is to maintain them at where they are, and that's 1 year's worth of growth, and with their like peers who are high achievers like them, because they're being compared to kids like that.
I guess I'm also thinking with is that it seems that you can make a lot of growth with a particular individual who's farther behind, can demonstrate a greater amount of growth versus the high performing student. But guess what? We could talk later, Claudia, if I need more help with that.
Awesome. All right. So Mr. Birch, 3 years worth of data from Mr. Birch. And he is on that pattern that we never want to see anybody in the red at all. But if they are in the red, we want to see them coming out of the red, right? And so in 2017, Mr. Birch was in we call it the deep red, where he is at like a negative 3.6 or so. And then 2018, somehow he's done some PD, he did some coaching, and he has strengthened his instructional practices, and now he's at a negative 0.9. He's in the negative green, but he still is in the meat range, right? And now in 2019, the last tested year, whoa, he has moved almost to exceeding. He's at a positive 1 point, let's say 7, right? And he has made some true growth in the last 3 years. This is Mr. Birch's diagnostic. So what we see here are our lowest students, green standard error, green growth standard. Our standard error bars are above the green growth standard, and so is our blue bars. Our low kids are making some gains. Our middle kids, right, for the most part are making some gains, but our second standard error bar is falling below the green line. And our high kids, blue bar is above our growth standard, but our standard error bar is definitely crossing this green line, which lets us know that there are students in here that are and are not making growth. And we can't say for sure that this group of students actually improved their achievement. Right? And we say achievement, we're not talking about proficiency. We're just talking about their growth, right? And so that means that when they came in, some students left losing academic ground, right? So given this situation with Mr. Birch, what is likely to happen to his teacher effectiveness data if Mr. Birch is teaching a class with a wide range of learners, some coming in below, some coming in right on track, some coming in above grade level? What is likely to happen if Mr. Birch continues to use the same strategies he used last year when he fell into the meets growth category, but he attends training on meeting the needs of high-performing students and implements strategies he's learned? Mr. Birch is still remaining a focus on grade level expectations for all students and intentionally plans scaffolds for those that will need them. What do we think will likely happen to Mr. Birch's teacher effectiveness data?
You'll probably see the higher level students increase with their achievement, and possibly even some of the middle as well.
Yes, right. And so the idea behind this is if we only stop here, we miss the opportunity for professional growth here, one, and also growth for our students that is like an indirect impact of my own professional growth. And so the difference between Mr. Birch and Miss Maple is Miss Maple, bless her heart, she's in exceeds growth, and she's decided I'm going to pull out that file cabinet, dust off those lesson plans, and slap those babies back up there because that's what we're going to do today, right? And Mr. Birch has said, well, you know what? I've still got to, I'm going the wrong way. I've still got some things I've got to improve on, and I'm going to research those things, attend some trainings, put those things in place, as well as still maintain those same practices that I used last year. So this is kind of the idea that we want teachers to look at when they are looking at their value added and their diagnostic data. Once they have a clear understanding of that data, then they can move into using their student projections, right? And so now, as we are looking at student projections, we're going to see a few different things. One, they're going to access their projections in Navigator Portal because they will not be able to access them in EVAAS. So they will access them in their teacher portal, and their reports can be exported out in Excel or CSV or Word or PDF, what have you. And they can be manipulated also in the system as well. So this is what you're going to see. You're going to see your list of students, and then you're going to see all of their demographic information. And our screen is going to look a little different from this. But then you're going to see probabilities of them landing in different levels. So you're going to see the probability of them landing in 3, 4, or 5. And then you're also going to see the state projected percentile as well as the state projected achievement level. So you're going to see those things in your report, or teachers will see those things in their reports. And then what we always ask teachers to do is to come into their projected state percentile column and to sort it from lowest to highest, right? So the person that has the lowest percentiles at the top, highest at the bottom. Once we have teachers do that, we ask them to draw a line at the 33rd percentile. And then we ask them to draw another line at the 66th percentile. And then label those different sections, lowest for the top, middle, obviously for the middle, and the bottom group that falls between the 67th and the 99th percentile, highest. So we take our percentile, we sort it from lowest to highest. We export it if we want to, because we can't draw in Navigator Portal. We export it, and then we highlight or draw our lines 0 to 33, 34 to 66, and then 67 to 99 will already be left. And we want to label those lowest, middle, and highest. Once we have done that, what we get is basically who is currently sitting in front of me is included in this low group that is on my diagnostic report. Who is included in the middle group that is on my diagnostic report, and who is in the highest group that is on my diagnostic report. So this is how we use our EVAAS projections to connect the past and the present, right? We know that when we look at our diagnostic report, we know that that is old data. We know that those students are gone and we can't do anything with them. But if I know who currently is sitting in those seats, I still have work to do for this year, right? And so if I'm looking at this, if I'm looking here, my past, this tells me how I did last year with the low students that were assigned to me, right? And I did pretty well, right? My blue bar is pretty up there. My standard error bar is up there. Those kids made some gains. And so when I look here, I'm looking at who is now in that lowest group, right? And I want to continue to do some of those same things, but maybe I'm not saying that it's all perfect. I might still need to tweak some things, but overall, what I did last year worked, and I want to capitalize on that. Then I come here, and we're just going to jump down to the highest group. When I look at my high kids, I'm like, whoa, stop the presses. I didn't do very well, right? My high kids last year lost ground academically. That does not mean they weren't proficient, right? They may have still been 4s and 5s, but they didn't stay in their same place. They lost some ground academically in terms of their historical pattern of where they land in the state distribution, and they lost some ground. And so now I'm thinking, I might need to do something different, because I've got 1, 2, 3, 6, I got 7 high kids here that I need to be able to do something for. And it's not really about it impacting my data, but it's also about me not wanting to hurt kids, right? So I need to do something different for this group. And I don't know what that might be. I might need to reach out for some resources. I might need to go to PD. I might need to reach out to my coaches. But I know I'm hypersensitive. I'm aware now that this is my focus area, right? And so some reflection questions that you consider when you are looking at teacher data prior to looking at it with teachers. If history were to repeat itself in Miss Allen's class, how might specific students perform on the end of year assessment? So looking at one student from the low, middle, and high group, how would they perform if history repeats itself in her classroom? Number 2, note the number of students in each achievement group on both reports. Right, so maybe one year, Miss Allen only had 5 high kids, but now this year she's got 15, and that's like 80% of her class, right? But she didn't do too well, right? So note the number of students in each achievement group on both reports. If Miss Allen's instructional practices remain consistent, how might Miss Allen's growth results change in next year's report? Think about what are 2 professional growth roles that Miss Allen might want to establish for the current school year, and what type of support could help Miss Allen meet these goals. And these are just questions to help get the thinking happening around the data, right? So one thing that always comes up is in your projections. I'm sorry to make it a little dizzy. Someone asks, is there a threshold? Right? So if a student is at the 50th state projected percentile and he's got a 54 probability, because this is all about probabilities. These are not self-fulfilling prophecies. They are probabilities that a student will land at that state percentile. So if he's at Kaylee, if Kaylee is at the 54 percentile, that's like a 50-50 chance, right? That she will land in that area. Anything below 50 in probability means kind of like they're at risk of not reaching that mark. And of course, the higher they are above 50, the more confident we are that they will reach that mark. But there are no thresholds set by EVAAS that says if they are at the 75%, probability of reaching that level, that yes, they're going to make it, right? Because this is a projection. So sometimes we get 80% chance of rain and it doesn't rain a lick, right? So it's kind of the same concept. There are no thresholds. So just know that 50 is the kind of the mid. Below 50, they are, EVAAS consider them at risk of not reaching that mark, right? And then above, the higher above, the more confident we are that they can actually make that mark. But this is one test, one day in time. When we do know that, right? So depending on how I come in that morning, depends on how I show up and show out. I do want to make that that statement. Oh, also one other thing is that you may hear some teachers say, "Oh, let's say Bill he's projected to be at the 91 percentile. There's no way Bill could be the 91 percentile. He doesn't do any work in class. He's got like a 2.0 GPA. Or he's got a 1 point. I've actually heard this. He's got a 1.7 GPA. He's got an F in my class. He's not supposed to be there. Well, this is the idea. One, this is all based on historical testing history. Right? So this is not about what he or she is doing in class. This is about what they are capable of producing at the end. So this is skill versus will. Bill may have the skill, but he might not have the will to do the work in class. So we got to keep those two things separate. Sometimes they go hand in hand, but when we see these anomalies, and you might not see them all the time, but they do happen where we see these very high projected state percentiles, but then students' actual scores in class are not speaking to that. We got to have that conversation, right? And so it's a very eye-opening thing when teachers see that, because it kind of makes them see students in a different lens than they have been seeing them all year. All right, so we have those projections. Once again, those are in EVAAS, in Navigator Portal for teachers, and they are able to be exported so that they can manipulate and save them how they want to. So lastly, we have a teacher reflection activity sheet that walks teachers through this process. All right, and if you're in the PowerPoint, this is linked here, but it's also in your digital folder. So first step, we ask teachers to access their diagnostic report. If they have not ever engaged with their diagnostic report, you probably want to have them engage with their diagnostic report before doing this activity. And then for each of their groups, 0 to 33, low, middle, and high, they're going to write down their growth index from the previous year, right? So if it's a negative point, if it's a positive 9 here and a positive 3 here and maybe a -2 here, fine. -2, +9, +7, what have you. But they're going to write those numbers here. Then they're going to go into access their projections, and hopefully they've divided, or they know the steps to divide into the 3 groups. And then they're going to place those names here. Now, if I am a high school teacher, I'm probably not going to sit and write the names out. Sometimes we do have our elementary school teachers write the names in there because they have less kids, and it makes the internalization a little bit different. But high school people can highlight the spreadsheet itself. They can cut and copy and paste the names. But we just want to make sure that we have our data here and the names of students who are currently in my classroom listed here. Right? When I do that, at a glance, just from this top and middle portion, I am seeing what my growth was last year, who's falling in those groups, and do I have an area that is standing out? Right? So if I am a -2 here and I have a list of high kids, woo, I know that this is an area of focus for me. If I'm a -2 here and I have a list of list of low kids, this is going to be my focus area. All of them are my focus area, but there's going to be some area that I'm going to have to do a little bit more work for because that might not be my area of strength. And then lastly, the step 3 is to reflect on the current and past practices used in instruction. If the same practices are being used, consider if they will render the same results. If the results are positive, how can you capitalize and continue to grow students? If potential results are negative, then what resources or supports will you need to change that trajectory? And then consider the implications, right? So what are the implications for this year? So what does that mean for my instruction? What does that mean going forward for my own personal development? What does it mean for me and my students? And it's a reflection sheet just to get teachers thinking about the data. One thing about projections when used in combination with our diagnostic report, it's not just about what students need support, but it's also about what teachers need support and where they might need support. And so in a nutshell, that brings us kind of to the close of all that. I mean, I know it went really, really quickly. In order to do some of this work, you do have to look at your whole school reports and then looking at my value added, my diagnostic for my grade level teams, coming back and looking at individual teacher reports, really digging into that diagnostic report, and then attaching that to, now that we know our diagnostic and how well we did with certain groups, who's sitting in those groups, and looking at our student projections. There is a report guide. So just in case you've gone through any other EVAAS training with us and oh gosh, what were those reports again? There is a report guide that can just jog your memory, and it has the picture of the report, explanation of the report, and then some guiding questions to help dig into the report data. And that is also in your folder, as well as the link here. All right. And then there are also other resources to support this kind of work, as well as any other data digging and assessment work on our Google site, as well as on our Canvas site. Right? So there's an EVAAS map triangulation course right now. There's not an EVAAS course because EVAAS updated their site when we were completing our course. And so that will be coming out. And that's something that you may want teachers to dig into before or if or whenever EVAAS data is released. So that will be coming out. We will send a memo out when that does happen. But there are other courses on here that teachers may find useful. And so at this point in time, I'm opening it up. Does anybody have any questions? Awesome. Well, if you don't have any questions right now and you start digging in later and you have questions later, do not hesitate to email, because that's always happens. You're working later, like, what was that again? And what happened? So please, 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 please do not hesitate to reach out, email any one of us. And we will get back to you. We do have a team email. It is ducey@cms.k12nc.us. So if you have questions, you can just email that, or any one of us individually, and we will hop right on it. And at this point in time, we thank you for your attending, and let us know how we can be of help to you. If you did not sign in or did not get the link from earlier, here's all of the information. You're